Greetings, War Thunderers. This is Longshot with you again. This is a tutorial on flying the Focke-Wulf A-1 in arcade and continues my series on underrated, misused and neglected fighter planes. This plane was designed as a high altitude interceptor, so that's how I'll be looking to use it in War Thunder. I don't usually mention the background music, but this time my choice of classical German composers is quite deliberate. To fly this plane well, you need to be calm, measured, patient, thoughtful and precise, just like the music. So let's see what this plane can do. Beginning with a climb up to a stall hammerhead. I'll apply rudder to turn it over into a dive. It's a little slow in the turn, but it handled very smoothly. No hint of a stall or any loss of control. Next I'll test the snap roll. It's a bit tight, but it moved the reticle far enough to be effective. I'll see if I can induce a stall spin by climbing, throttling back to zero, and then snap rolling. And no, it just wants to roll. No hint of a stall spin at all. So we can't use this trick to make a chasing plane overshoot. So lastly I'll demonstrate its general handling in a series of turns and loops. Plane is powerful but ponderous. Its small elevators were designed to allow control at high speed without locking up, not to make the plane turn sharply. And indeed it does handle very well in a dive. Speed is what this plane's all about. For manoeuvring it really needs to be at 300 km an hour or faster. All of which means this plane is useless as a dogfighter. It's not what it was designed for. So you must avoid dogfight situations at all costs. So next, I'll look at the plane's armament. The A-1 has 4 7.9mm machine guns firing through the propeller, and 2 20mm FFM cannons on the wings. Convergence is important. I've set mine to 400 meters, and you must avoid head-ons against planes with nose-mounted weapons. So this is my first ever battle flying this plane. No mods have been researched, so I thought I'd show the tactics you should follow when starting out on the plane. It's a high-altitude fighter, therefore I'm climbing. My climb rate is not as good as other planes, so I'm travelling sideways to the battle area, rather than flying forwards and risking combat with enemies that have already climbed higher. Other people are taking point in the initial merge at altitude, and they're welcome to it. Even when fully researched, this plane is not the best climber for its rating, so you'll have to be patient and avoid contact early on. The aim is to win altitude supremacy, and you can't do that if you're tumbling out of the sky with half a wing missing, or if you follow a target in a dive and end up at ground level. But there are planes up here we can and should attack, isolated bombers, like that Junker 88. This plane is an excellent bomber hunter, and they will be your bread and butter flying the A-1 both now and when the plane is fully modded up. As my convergence is 400 meters, I won't open fire until I'm less than 500 meters from the target. The first thing I noticed was the amount of spread in the bullets. It's like firing a shotgun. That improves once you've unlocked new cannons and machine guns, but for now it means you have to get nice and close to do damage. So the 88 dived away and I've switched to a TBF. Don't worry if you don't get a kill. Forcing bombers down from altitude into the pack of hyenas below is just as useful to your team, and kills will come. Just stay high and keep hunting. Okay, so he's diving as well, and as it turned out, that was my first kill in the A-1. And by the way, notice all the enemy fighters have died or dived away. Often patience is all you need to gain high altitude supremacy. The PBY is one of the more difficult planes to kill with 190 simply because it's so slow and your plane is fast. Now you could cut your throttle and deploy landing flaps to slow down, but that would expose you to bomber gunners and attack from climbing enemy fighters. I prefer to keep my speed high and make wide sweeping turns, weaving back and forth in attacking passes from the side and underneath or above, always aiming a little ahead of the lead indicator to target the engines, fuel tanks and pilot. A default belt on these cannons is pretty ordinary, to be honest. As soon as possible you want to be unlocking the air targets belt, which is far more effective. And because I'm taking so long, it's perhaps inevitable that someone else should start attacking the PBY. Kills are admittedly hard to come by while flying a stock level A-1. So after I reload, which takes a painfully long time, I kept expecting that P400 to send him down in flames, I make sure I give him a very long and accurate burst, because I really don't want to lose this kill. Holding my breath, because the P400 is following him down. But no, that was kill number 2. So before I move on from bomber hunting, this is the most effective way to attack dive bombers. You don't want them diving, so you approach low. Sometimes this encourages them to try climbing, which makes them the easiest possible target. Getting nice and close and letting loose. Now you may have noticed that all of my videos are ultra low graphics, and that's because of the quality of my computer. I have lousy frame rate if I fly a higher graphics mode while recording. But ultra low happens to show smoke through clouds, which means I could track this guy even though he dived into the clouds for cover. Life just isn't fair sometimes. Okay, so it was now towards the end of the battle and bombers had stopped spawning above the clouds, so I decided to drop below them in my search for targets. I'm just looking around and I see there's 2 enemies I could potentially attack. The P-40's incoming, so I'm pulling up rather than taking the risk of entering a turn fight or being blindsided. And now I've decided to dive on the P-40, as that will take me back towards friendly territory, and he's more of a threat to me than the PE-2 is. Even better, he's climbing right in front of me, making himself a large target, and even the default cannon belt can chop wings off at close range. So on this map there are no bombers to hunt, and there was no way I'm going down into that labyrinth swarming with turn fighters. So I stayed high and I looked for targets to pick off, like this climbing LA-5. Didn't quite get him at the top of his turn. Here I've flown above the stream of incoming enemy planes, looking for someone a little higher that I can safely dive at, or for planes looking to climb at me. So I picked out that LA-5, and now I'm smoothly dropping down onto E6. This dive also takes me back towards friendly territory and safety, which is very important in any boom and zoom attack. So I get within convergence range before I let him have it. He was totally unaware of my presence until it was way too late. So I've climbed back up and I'm ready for the next attack. Boom and zoom tactics are by nature a slow and methodical way of fighting. You have a lot of downtime between attacks in which to fly to the best position and wait for the ideal opportunity. In this case my targets flew into the caves, so I had to pull out of the attack, and that kind of thing is common. As expected, the plane handles really nicely at high speed, with no hint of control stiffening. Anyway, I've spotted a P-40 climbing up at me, so I've climbed in order to exhaust his energy. And as the battle's just about over, I'm going to dive down and finish him off. crater is another map on which most of the action is at low altitude, so to be involved, you often need to fly to around 2,000 meters and practice diving boom and zoom attacks, and the same is true of all domination games. This is your one and only tactic with the 190 A1, so it's important you practice and master it. Isolated planes flying in straight lines are ideal targets. When you see one, make sure not to miss out. And then as soon as you're past the target, whether he's alive or dead, extend away while checking your surroundings and climb only when it's safe to do so. Here I'm diving early to gain speed in order to catch a P-40 coming from the left, as I can see he's moving quite fast. If I'd waited till he was under me, I probably wouldn't have caught up with him. As it is, I exit the dive neatly on his tail. I don't get the kill in this case, but I'm not going to stay and dogfight him. I'll fly away to prepare for the next attack, diving a little to gain extra speed just to make sure I get separation. This time I'm going to bend the rules a little. I start with a conventional diving attack from 2,000 meters, pausing on the way down to make sure I'm lined up properly with the target. Even so, twisting planes in turn fights are hard to hit. As it is, I just get a short burst away before I've overshot and then I'm climbing back out. The quick check showed no new enemies approaching, so I risk another dive from a lower altitude. And that means my next pass is much sooner than it would have been otherwise, but also that I'm slower. Therefore I'm at risk of being bounced by a faster or better turning enemy. See how low and slow I get as I crawl away. Exiting from an attack is when boom and zoom fighters are the most vulnerable, as this next segment shows. I can see a P-47 below me making dive attacks, so I target him, hoping to catch him as he's climbing. And as I start my dive, he's circling around, so I adjust to match his heading. And then he starts diving himself. My planned attack is now out the window, but I'm persevering and just making it up as I go, and that is very dangerous. What I should have done was just pulled out the moment he started to turn. Now looking back, I can see him climbing and stalled, and that's when I should have been attacking. Had I waited till then, I'd have caught him dead to rights. Instead of climbing to reset as I could have right now, the blood's rushed to my head and I decide to attack again. By the time I'm in my dive, the P-47's flown away and I'm starting to look for other targets to attack. And that was the best I could manage, and now I'm diving and running towards friendly territory, travelling at only 600 kilometers an hour with a bogey on my tail. As I said in the MiG-3 video, if you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. So what are my options now? This plane can't turn fight. It would be foolish to try. I know my attack is a US fighter by the Red 50 cal tracer, and therefore it's likely to be a lot more manoeuvrable than me. I can't stall spin to make him overshoot either. Yes, it's a P-400. Running is really my only defence, and it's a good one. I'm leading him directly under my fighter spawn in the hope that someone will pick him up, and I'm making only the slightest adjustments to my course to dodge his aim, while keeping my speed high and, importantly, keeping him flying in a straight line so my friends can easily kill him. Okay, so he's broken off, so it's time for me to turn defence into attack. It looks like he has the upper hand against that Emil, so my help is needed. I'm using WEP to climb hard, and I'm hoping to catch him in a turn. And there we go. And I do a bit of showboating here, but if I'd been more careful, I wouldn't have needed rescuing like that to begin with. And by the way, I made sure to thank that 109 pilot in the chat, for he saved my butt. Up at high altitude is where this plane really shines, especially once it's fully upgraded. Even so, it's not always easy getting there, and this shows why. My burst climb is finished and I have to pause, but look at that P-39 and Yak as they just keep on climbing. This is a good climber, but not the best. So how do you win altitude supremacy if your plane isn't the fastest climber? Simply by being more careful and more determined than the enemy. And in this example I show poor judgment. The 109 has shot down my squad mate, so I attack from a bad position underneath for the sake of revenge, and I get what I deserve. What I should have done was flown away and climbed higher, and then attacked from a position of strength. Here there are two enemy P-47s and an F6F at altitude, and the P-47 on the right is isolated and looks like he's preoccupied, so I'm flying towards him rather than risk coming under attack from the other two. And this takes me sideways to the battle, and I can keep a close eye on how the situation's developing. So the P-47 is just boom and zooming away here, and I'm hoping I can catch him climbing, as I might be able to finish him quickly. So I'm using WEP to increase my closing speed, but he sees me coming, breaks his climb and turns past at a tight angle, giving me time only for a quick passing burst. And now we're both extending away, as neither of us are flying dogfighters and he's a decent pilot. So he's coming back, and I've been trying to climb, but I doubt it's nearly enough. I have to face his head-on attack and evade it. And the snap roll does that quite successfully. And I assume he's going into a zoom climb immediately, so I dive out of the roll into a low yo-yo, and I'm using WEP to accelerate as much as possible, and then I use that speed to helicopter up at him. That gives me more energy than he has. And he's stalling, and I have him square in my sights. Except, somehow, the War Thunder gods are on his side, I miss, and he's off the hook. And what's more, I then hear bullets, and I assume the other P-47's attacking me. So I call it quits and dive off into the clouds. Gotta know when to hold them and when to fold them. When you do win the battle for altitude though, you can embark on long killing streaks, just gorging yourself on bombers and better still fighters that try to climb to you. Here's an example of my low approach encouraging a dive bomber to climb, which of course makes him the easiest possible target. It takes very little time to cross the map once you're at altitude, so I quickly catch this B-25 and put an end to his base bombing. Down there is a P-38 attacking a friendly bomber, and he's high enough for me to dive to the rescue. Here's a pro tip for high-level bombers. If there's fighter support at altitude, stay high. Don't dive to where the enemy can reach you. This Corsair also had ideas of climbing up at me. So I'm going to go into a bit of a spiral dive to make him stall as he tries to helicopter, and I'm going to try and keep behind him. Here I see his lead indicators dropped, so I think he can't quite get guns on me, so he's an easy kill. And as it turned out, it was a little risky, but I got away with it. Here are Stukas trying to attack me, so I'm going to climb and exhaust what little energy a Stuka has before swooping for the easiest of kills. No matter how good that plane is at turning, he can't outturn me if he's stalled. And that's just poetry. Calm, clear and precise. So now I get so busy looking for climbers that I forget to watch for spawning bombers and nearly pay the price as a Dauntless jumps me. And fortunately he didn't sneak up and nail me from close range from behind. I can't dogfight him, for he can turn very sharply. My one defence is simply to run away, and you can see how quickly I leave him behind. He soon tired of the chase, so I decided to turn and sneak up on him. And for some reason he was now oblivious. Again, the low approach. Get into convergence rage and let him have it. One last battle I want to show you on this ugly new Spain ground strike map. I'm in my second burst climb here, and it seems that P40 over there is the only high altitude threat. And it doesn't look like he's really trying that hard to climb either. So I head for that PBY when I decide to check on the P40 again, and this time I see that not only has he climbed, he's closing in to attack. So the first thing I do is climb, but my energy is low, and he's approaching very quickly. I decide to fake a head-on and then climb sharply to make him stall as he tries to follow, but I'm simply not going fast enough myself. As a result, he gets guns on me, and I am very lucky to survive it. But looking back at him, he does indeed stall, but I'm not high enough to hammerhead into a dive and take advantage. Instead, I perform a split S to gain even more speed while he's recovering from his stall. And that lets me get guns on him first, and now I can finish him off with a nice deflection shot. I gained that advantage because I retained what energy I had and increased it, while he squandered his. Here's a Dauntless, and I immediately move to attack. And now that I'm still over friendly territory, so as soon as he sees me, he can dive because he's so close to his targets. He doesn't care at this point if he loses his altitude. And that's what makes bombers hard to kill if you let them travel this far across the map. You really want to be deep over enemy territory, which is also where your team's bombers need you to be in order to guard them from enemy fighters like this rocket-equipped Hurricane. So as I approached, I climbed hard. I don't want a head-on engagement, I want to attack with all the advantages on my side. He sees me, he tries to helicopter up, and he stalls his plane. It's the same old story. So 2 bombers have spawned in at once. Now I'm going to go for the TBF simply because it's closer and higher. And he makes it easy for me by trying to attack me, when really he should have been diving away to avoid the danger of my attack. People are awesome. Okay, the Hurricane pilot now spawns back in a Wellington. And this is like shelling peas now. If you kill bombers over here, they don't get to bomb my bases over there. It's really very simple. Now I know there are bomber pilots who would be enraged watching this, calling me a spawn camping cheat. Am I spawn camping? On the bomber spawn, I guess so. But if I let those bombers live, they'd have no qualms about ruining everyone's enjoyment of the game by pressing the spacebar over our bases and prematurely ending the battle. So why should I allow that to happen? Also, each of these bombers had plenty of time to see me and dive through their fighter spawn. None of them chose to do so. Their team could also have tried to contest altitude and stop me doing this, and they didn't. This is war, it's brutal. But as it happens, the rest of my team didn't win the ground targets war down below, but I'd done my best to stem the tide. I had time for one last kill before the game ended. So to summarise, this plane has a clearly defined role and it performs that role very well. Can it intercept targets at high speed? Yes, it can. Can it use superior energy to stall attacking planes and then kill them? Most definitely. What it can't do is turn fight. Flying a 190 A-1 requires a calm mind, good judgment, planning your attacks in advance and being disciplined enough to stick to those plans. Use speed and altitude to evade attackers. Never go head on. Never follow a target in a turn. And never slow down. On ground strike maps with strategic bases, try to get altitude supremacy. This will require patience, avoiding early combat, attacking only when you have the advantage and knowing when to give up if the enemy holds the high ground in strength. When you can't climb, fall back on low altitude boom and zoom tactics, which you'll also use in domination battles. Bombers are your main source of kills. Never hesitate to attack them, especially from the side and underneath. If you're like me, you'll prefer to get in nice and close to unleash the devastating power of the FFM cannons with air target belts, no matter what kind of plane you're attacking. Using the tactics demonstrated in this video, I started with a newly purchased stock level 190 A-1 that I'd never flown, and I've now amassed 51 kills while being shot down 4 times. All of my deaths were in some way or other my own fault, either for breaking the simple rules of engagement or for failing to notice an approaching attacker. So I wish you every success flying this plane. It's very good at what it does, and I look forward to meeting you up at altitude. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.